This video is going to cover the basics of annotation. I'm not going to walk through necessarily every single dimension in this project, particularly because I feel like at this point we have the dimension tool down pretty well. But what we are going to look at are some of the other text tools that we can use and features to add in details into our floor plans and our elevations that may not be something that are just inherently present with the way Revit does things. Because while Revit does take care of a fair amount of the work for us in terms of like connecting our walls together and everything, and being able to create things like stairs fairly easily, there still is some work as the designer that we're going to have to put together. So the first thing we'll look at are just some tag systems that we can use. We've already tagged our rooms, but we'll tag some of our other features as well. And then adding in different text and annotations, as well as adding in detail lines. So I'm just going to start off in my level 1 floor plan. So I'm going to double click on it in my project browser to enter it. And we, as I mentioned, have a fair amount of stuff in here already, but if we look at our drawings, and I scroll up to the floor plan for level 1, we have some tags here on the windows as well as the doors that are just gonna kind of help refer to a schedule within our document set to figure out like where it's the size of this window, the materials of this window. And then we also have a couple of leaders or just text notes that are pointing to different parts of our building to help us understand the assembly or the construction a little bit better. These leaders or annotations are also going to become really crucial when we do the wall section in our next video. So first off, in Revit, when I go to place something like a window tag or a door tag, I'm going to do that through the Annotate tab. This is going to become one that we spend a lot of time in this video and next video. So there's kind of two ways you can go about adding these tags in. We can do a tag by category, or we can also do a tag all that is not tagged within there. So I often like to just do tag by category. And then I can click on something like a window and it's going to assign it a tag by default. There's a few things within this window tag that I sort of already don't like. You can see too that when I'm over the wall, the shape changes to a wall tag. When I'm over the door, the shape changes to a door tag. So it's going to kind of take a lot of that stuff inherently in for us. But I don't like where that one's placed. So I'm going to hit escape a couple of times to get out of it. And then I can click on this window tag and I can do some editing to it. So for instance, this already has a leader attached to it. I'm just going to say that I don't want a leader line at all. And I'm going to move it closer to my window. I'm just going to kind of drag it in closer to the window. And it also assigned it a number. Why it starts windows with just some random number like 19, I'm unsure of personally, but I'm going to use a lettering system for my windows and a numbering system for my doors just to make it a little easier to tell the difference between the two. So I'm just going to click on that and I'm going to change it to just window type A. When I do that, it's warning me that I'm changing this parameter and that it's going to affect any other element associated with this parameter. I'm just going to say that's fine. I'm going to continue on anyway. And then when I go to add additional windows to my tags, or rather I can just hit escape a bunch and then go back into tag category. We'll see that it's doing A already for us. We can additionally get rid of the leader line before we place it to just make it a little easier to place these tags. And I believe that's all the windows on the first story. I'm going to hit escape a few times too to end the command. And the nice thing with the tag system is that if I decide that I actually want this to be window type B, and maybe I use window type A somewhere else, and I click yes, we'll see that all of them update. Since these are all the same window type, they'll all update together. And I'll click OK to move it back to type A. We'll also notice too that it's going to let us know when these tags are lined up, just to keep everything nice and organized. And one thing that I often like to do is I like to click on my dimensions and move this witness line up, and it'll snap when they're kind of in line with each other. That way it's just not going through the letter. It's a little bit more legible and clear. And I can hit escape a couple times. The same way to do doors is I can tag my doors. So I'll go to category tag, and I'm going to tag my doors. This one, it did 5 automatically for it, which is again a little bit annoying. So I'll hit escape a couple of times. I'll click on the door tag itself, and I'm going to change this to door number 1. So that way, when I hit escape several times and go to tag my additional doors, why is that one going 6? Not sure, because it should then go to 2 and then 3. The fact that I only have 3 doors on here is not going to be that big of a deal. To hit escape several times and click on this to edit this one to 2. It says I have a door in here marked as 2. I'm not sure where. Will it show me where? So there's door 3. Where's my other door 3? I don't have another door 3. See, I don't know why it's telling me that. But anywho, now I have my door tags. If I was going to do something like, again, I mentioned with the room tags to kind of change it to the 101 to tag the rooms. The same thing with doors. If I wanted the doors tagged for like a big school, I'd want to adjust this first so that way it keeps following suit. But it's claiming somewhere already in my project I've tagged a door as door type 1, but I do not believe I have. Same thing then with like level 2 is I would go up to level 2 and I could tag all of my doors and windows. Another way we can tag the doors and windows kind of in a quick, succinct manner would be to use the tag all within the annotate tab. So I'll go to tag all, and I'll say that I want all of my doors tagged and I want all of my windows tagged. And I'll say, okay, and it's just gonna add them in automatically. So here's where my door number 2 was. I don't know why it numbered this one as 2 automatically, but now I can make this door number 4. I can make this one door number 5, and it added my window tags automatically, and I'm just going to do my little method of moving that witness out on each one. And that way I don't have to go and individually place them. Sometimes it's a little easy to accidentally get them just slightly off when you go to individually place them like that, or to miss a window, forget about a window when you're tagging them. So the tag all can be pretty helpful. Tagging works the same too when you're in a framing plan or when you're going to tag things like beams. So if I go into the framing plan, I can do a tag by category, and I can click on, really I just need to tag one of the beams since they're all going to be the same here. And I'll also tag this beam. I don't like where it's placed, so I can just drag that move to just move it down. I'm even going to move it over so it's not sitting on that center line. To adjust them and move them around. And then I'll go into my level 3 plan, and I'll finish tagging my doors up here. So I believe, let me go back into level 2. I finished up on 5. So this will be 6, 7. So then I have all of my doors tagged, all of my windows tagged. That's a pretty simplistic one of just using our tag feature to add in our labels. Whenever we need to add in a little bit more information than what a tag can give us, we can also then use the text tool here in the annotation tab to add in text boxes or those leaders with annotation. Its keyboard shortcut is TX, or I can come here and just click on the text tool. And we'll notice too that we have the option to just do text without an arrowhead, or we can have an arrow that has 2 segments. We can have an arrow that is curved. We can have an arrow that has 1 segment. So depending on what it kind of looks like within our drawings here is what we're going to follow suit with. So we have just a straight one, another straight one, another straight one, and then a 2 segment one. So I'm going to first just say that I want an arrow with 1 segment. I'm going to click where I want my text box to be, or where I want my arrow to point. I can move it after the fact, so the fact that it's going through this is not great. and then I can type what I wanted to say. So brick over metal stud, and then once I hit close, we will have it kind of a few things with our text is just in its current size, it's a little bit too big for our drawing. It's really kind of overpowering everything. So we can come here to our properties and we can change it. If I use the 332 and just move myself out, don't know why it's not updating. If I click on here to do 332, there we go. Now it's updated and it's much more kind of like manageable to look at and read. I can also move it around too. So the fact that it's kind of like really in that dimension is not great, not ideal. And we can also change things with our leader here. So the fact that this has this kind of weird crook, I don't like that. I want it to just go into the middle. So I'll click on that option for the middle of it. And then I'm going to use the move tool to just move it down so it's just kind of one straight segment. I didn't move that exactly to be straight and it's going to bug me. So let's see if I can make it perfectly straight. I still didn't make that perfectly straight, and it's always going to bug me. What I can also do is remove a leader, and I can add one onto it, so that way I can make it nice and straight, because I don't know about you, but that's going to bug me if it's not nice and straight on there. And I have it point to it. I can do a little bit of changes too with kind of how these leaders look. So if I go into edit its type, this is where I can edit everything related to font that is 3/32 of an inch large when it goes to print out. I can change the text size if I want for all of my leaders, or rather any font that's under this type. I can also change the text itself. So if I wanted something like City Blueprint or Country Blueprint, I can change it to that. I'm just going to leave mine as Arial because I don't mind Arial. Sometimes I do like Arial Narrow. If I hit apply, I just kind of like that, how that looks a little bit more, but again, we don't have to change it. We can also change things like our arrowhead, but see how, oh no, that knocked me off kilter. So I'll fix it later. Right now I have just an arrow that's open at 30 degrees. I could do a filled arrow to change that arrowhead, and I can alter that degree amount if I want. I typically like these filled ones, but you can ultimately do sort of whatever you want when it comes to your text. I usually like the filled 15 amount. And then again, let's see if I can drag this to be nice and straight. I don't think I'm going to be able to drag it to be straight, so I'm going to remove it and add it back on this side so that way it will be straight. That's just me, I guess, though, being kind of annoying. I've been told before. Same thing then as if I need to add in notes for things like my cavity wall here, is I'm just going to go into the text tool. I'm going to say that I want a text with just one segment leader, point to my wall, bring it out, and notice too how it's showing me when it's going to match up. And then I can type in my, whoops, might help if I spell correctly. And I'm clicked off of it to end it, and now I'm starting a new one here, which is not what I want. If I want one like on this concrete pad, I can go back into this text tool and I can use the to segment, in which I'll click where I want it to start, and then I can make my bend, and then I can type in what I require it to say. So we can adjust things here, like where the arrow is kind of coming from in relation to the text. I usually like to just keep it as kind of the middle centered. We can also add additional arrows to things. My recommendation for kind of finishing up all of your annotations and your dimensions is to either print out a copy of the provided drawings and then just sort of with a red marker cross out every single one that you've added to make sure you're adding everything in, or to open it up on something like your laptop or a computer next to you if you're in the lab, so you can work through it. So that's what I have here. Is I have two screens, and that way I can kind of look between the two of them to just easily kind of identify everything. Same thing then with adding annotations into something like our framing plan. We have a note in which is showing that our framing here is spaced at 4 inches on center. That I could just do it at a text box, and I'm going to originally just make it as a text without any leader and click to place it. So I'm going to say at 4 feet 0 inches on center. Please make sure you're also lettering all this text. Since we only have to hit caps lock, it's pretty easy to do so. I'm going to move it so that it's just a little bit further up. And then I'm going to not do that. I'm going to add a leader onto it. If it'll let me. Here we go. So I click on it once, and I can add a leader onto one side and the other side. So that way I can just have this where it is spanning straight across for all of these here. This is one of the few scenarios where you would need leaders on either side. And then I can also look through this drawing and add in all of my different notes or features. So again, that's just going to be using text box. Click where you want your leader to start. Where do you want it to end? And then type in your note. And you can click off then to end it. Something like the one here where it's talking about our floor deck, I'd want to use a 2-segment one. And I'll click where I want it to start, where I want it to bend, and then I like to keep everything nice and lined up because it's just a little bit more pretty and organized. System, open web, steel joists at 4 feet 0 inches on center. A really horrific and unfun thing about Revit is that spell check is not built in. Spell check exists up here to do its own individual spelling. I'm just going to add OC to my dictionary because that's going to be something that I'll use plenty of times and I don't want it correcting it each time. But if you spell something incorrect, it won't highlight red. So just kind of keep that in mind. It's something that you and I are very used to. And in fact, I had a student who was submitting something for a competition, and then I realized after we submitted everything in the title block, we had spelt the word association wrong, and it was for a competition for someplace that had association in their name. So we spelt their name wrong in every single one of our title blocks, which wasn't ideal. So in each of your plan views and your elevation views as well, we're just going to add in kind of these little notes and features. So if I go into, say, my east elevation, I believe has a couple of notes and a few dimensions as well. And so I can go into my east elevation, and this is where I can do the same thing to provide stuff like my either annotations or my leaders. While I'm in here too, I'm also just going to clean some of this stuff up. We'll go over finalizing that when we're in the preparing for like documentation, but kind of maybe hiding some things. Like we kind of want to hide our level 5, we'll hide our level 4. We actually, in this view, looking at the printed one, I have these section cuts even hidden. So hide in view. I could do category for this to just get rid of both of those in one go. But if I wanted to add something like a dimension to this view. I could do it the same way I added dimensions in every one of my other views. So to place them, we can either in the annotation tab, we can use this aligned dimension tool. This is the official button to this shortcut button that we've been using quite a bit. Or again, keyboard shortcut DI. And I can say from the floor to the middle of this grid is 8 feet. From the middle of this grid to the top is 8 feet, which I accidentally clicked on that grid, so I'm going to Control Z to redo it. Is 8 foot. Same thing then with like my dimensions for my curtain wall system here, for where these are going to sit. And I can add in all of my features and dimensions for how far up my parapet is. And when you have small dimensions like this, it's always a good idea to pull that dimension out from level 3 to level 5 for how tall that's going to be. For my window and where my sill is on my window. And then I'll bring that one out as well. And notice too how I'm bringing them out to be that consistent height, or at least out. So I'm making sure that I'm bringing them out so that this way they're going to sit in line with each other when they're in here. And then adding in things like my notes or my annotations where I'll go to text. And I'm just going to use one single segment to say this is a brick veneer. And then pointing to this one, CMU veneer. So that way everything's still kind of like nice and organized and tidy. For something like my system here, then I'm going to switch to a 2 segment. I personally just don't like the curved option, so I don't use it. And I'll point to my curtain wall, up, out, aluminum. And yes, I do have to look at my other drawings to make sure I'm spelling it correctly, because I'm just not a good speller. And that's okay. I can use the spell check option to make sure that I've spelled it correctly, which I didn't. I spelled storefront wrong, so it's a good thing I checked. And I'll change it, because otherwise that would have been slightly embarrassing. I'm sure I've given you drawings already with stuff spelled wrong. Even when I looked at the residential one, I spelled my name wrong in one of them, and none of you mentioned anything, which I appreciate a little bit. So on each one of my drawings, I'm just going to go and add in things like all of these notes and any dimensions that we have. If we have the dimensions for things like our heights on this east elevation and all of these notes here, then I don't need to put those on the north elevation. Since every single one of my windows has a 2-foot sill height and a header height of 6'8", I don't need to add that to each one of them. So really, my view here for this elevation, other than like hiding my section cuts and hiding my level 2, my level 5, and my level 4, this view then is pretty much almost ready to print or prep. We need to do a little bit of cropping, but essentially we're all set with something like the north view. Same thing with our south view. We just have to do a little bit of prep work, maybe even stylizing a little bit with some shadows, but the view itself doesn't really have a whole lot that needs to be adjusted or fixed with it, because if we have those dimensions in one, we don't need to keep pasting them onto every single one of them. When it comes to things like our floor plans and our dimensions, we do have a few that we need to add. Some of them we have already added in from, okay, good, I am in my one here. I'm going to delete, well, actually, no, I do need those dimensions, not delete them. So I'm going to move them out over here. We do have a few dimensions that we need to add that I haven't placed yet. And so again, that is just the keyboard shortcut DI or this button here. And that's where I can do things like add in my dimensions, saying that this is going to be 12 And again, I want to make sure I'm lining up all of my dimensions with each other when I do have them in my drawing. When it comes to things like I've already got all of these dimensions from my windows because I use them to help just place where those windows are going to go. But I need to add in something that says like how far it is from this grid to this grid to this grid. While we have that grid in place, we still need dimensions letting us know what is on the grid. And I'll go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. And I'll move up to place it. And then I'll click to place it. Now it's in a kind of an awkward spot because of the dimensions I have here. So I'm going to move these ones down by just clicking on them and dragging them down. I'll drag that guy down as well. So that will give me a little bit more room to place an overall dimension here. What I could also do is I can click on my grids and I can adjust the grid to be up. So if I give myself more grid space, I do a little bit want to move it down ever so slightly because it's in that elevation marker. But if I give the grid a little bit more space, then I have additional space to do things like put in my dimensions. I'll put in another dimension that just says overall, my building's 80. I clicked off of number 5, so that way it didn't place. And so I can place dimensions across. And essentially, what would be a good idea with this is sort of the same way with all of the notes, is to use the dimension tool and kind of just go through the drawing set you've been provided. And as you're dimensioning things in our set here, to just kind of mark them off within that PDF file or within a printout of the PDF. To just know that you have in fact placed that dimension or done that part or feature. And so the dimension tool is a pretty straightforward one to use, and we've used it quite a bit now, so I feel like we are pretty comfortable with it in each one of those plans. Lastly, then in this video, we'll just look at too how we can add in some detail lines or features, things that may not be inherent within a set of drawings or a set of the plans that Revit just puts within it. So if I hit escape several times to get out of the dimension tool, within the annotate tab, we have this detail area in which we can add in our own line work. And especially when we do our wall section in our next video, we're going to do quite a bit of things within this little detail area. Detail line, as it says here, creates view-specific lines that are only visible in the view they're drawn, and we can essentially just freehand sketch things into our drawing that weren't in there to begin with. So I'm going to start the detail line tool, and then within this tool, I have the ability to change what I'm drawing, whether I'm drawing just lines, rectangles, I can do circles, and then I can also change the style of how that line is going to show up in a drawing. So we have thin lines and wide lines, we've got medium ones, we also have hidden lines, and we have overhead lines. So these are going to adjust, or center lines too, they're going to adjust how that line appears. So something like this circle that exists in the bathroom within our drawings, this circle is just showing the turning radius of a wheelchair within our drawing. But if I want to just add that in, I can do something like create a circle and say that I want that circle to be a hidden line. And then it's going to have a radius of 2.5 feet. Because the turning radius for this should be 60 in diameter. And that's 5 feet, so this would be half of 5 feet. The fact that it's not centered in this room kind of gives me like the ick a little bit. So what I could also do is something like just draw a line from one corner to another corner, hit escape a bunch of times to end the command, and then I could click on this circle and I can move it based on its center point. And if I move it out of the way, it should allow me to put it on the midpoint of this. There we go, there's my midpoint. And then just all I would have to do is hit escape a bunch of times and delete this It's essentially like me using a def point line or a reference just to find where the middle of this is. Same thing then with something like our door, to add a center line here to show that these two are aligned with each other, so we don't need to have an additional dimension, is I'm going to do a detail line, and I would want to change my line type to a center line, but if I forget and leave it as a hidden line and go from one center through here, I can change it after the fact. I can hit escape several times, I can click on this, and I can adjust its line type style right up here or over here to say that I want it to be a center line. And now it is in fact a center line on there. So those are, I believe, the only two lines that we want to add onto this particular drawing. In level 2, we have 2 lines to add into our bathroom space, one being that center line here, the other being a hidden line here. So I'll go back into detail line, and I'm just going to draw from this center up and see it's doing a hidden line. I can hit escape, I can click on it afterwards, and I can adjust it. The best case scenario would be to adjust it beforehand, but you can always fix it after. And then I'll click on this again. If I want to extend it out a little bit more, I can sit and play and adjust it. And then we'll add in our turning radius here. So again, that's going to be detail line, which is keyboard shortcut DL. And this just kind of lets you freehand draw things within Revit. So if there's something that you want to do, but can't necessarily figure out how to do in Revit, you can add those features in within Revit yourself. Before I draw this circle, what I'll do is I'll actually I'll put my little midpoint finder in first, hit escape a bunch of times. Now I'll go back into detail line. I'll say I want to do a circle on that midpoint. That way I just don't have to move it. 2'6", hit escape a bunch of times, click, delete. And then I would have to, of course, go through this drawing and make sure that I have like all of my annotations and all of my dimensions. So I would go through with my dimension tool, DI. I would add in my grid dimensions, click to place it. I'll add in my overall dimension, click to place it. But this is a kind of a task of find what you have on there and recreate your dimensions. An annotation like this where it says open to below is also just going to be with the text tool. So I'll hit escape several times. I'll do text, and I am going to do an elbowed one. I'm just going to click somewhere to start, turn it, make my elbow, open to below. And after I've placed it or clicked off of it, this is where I can hit escape several times, click on it once, don't double click it, and I can add another one on the right side, in which it's not seeming to be an elbow. I can sort of force it into a downward elbow, which is really weird. There we go. And I was still able to keep it nice and straight, which is kind of good. I'll bring this one out a little bit more, up, over, so that way I can make something like this double-sided one. But within this step is going to be just quite a few repetitive things of adding in all of the detail line work. Let me just double check on the framing plan. There's no line work we need to add. On the level 3 plan, there's no line work we need to add. On our elevations, there's also no line work we need to add. And then in the building sections as well, there's no line work that we're going to need to add. The wall sections do have quite a lot of detail line work that we're going to need to add, but that's going to be its own separate video. So this is just a really short, quick demo of just how to use things like the text tool, the tag tool, and the line tool. as well as the dimension, but we've used dimension quite a bit before. And so you can use kind of the rest of the time to just go through your drawing set and recreate it.